Hey guys, we had a really good comment posted by one of our subs, and in fact, I think I'll do a video about that comment also. But I started to write out my response and it got lengthy, so I thought, okay, here we go, another video. Here's my response. First of all, the comment was about how the sub believes that Christopher Watts actually did murder his wife and his children, and she thinks that he basically snapped, and she explained exactly why she thinks that. So like I said, I'll do a video about it, but here's my response, because in my opinion, of course, I think that Christopher Watts was telling the truth when he said that he did not murder Bella and Cece. So here's my response. My opinion is that Christopher Watts was using the freeze response survival instinct. I also believe his resilience to the stressors was very high. And his motivation was also very high. In my opinion, his motivation was to protect his daughters. And that he was conditioned, I would even say groomed, to continue in his world of make-believe, the make-believe wedded bliss. I think he was conditioned and groomed by extended family members who had nightly contact with him. In the beginning of the grooming process, I think that sex was the motivator, along with the misguided yet perfectly staged presence or image of the perfect mate. At first, the reward system was sex, but it was more than just sex. I think Christopher Watts was rewarded with being basically knighted as her savior, her protector, her rescuer, with all of her health challenges. And then I think that with promises of Christopher Watts' then girlfriend becoming a nurse and also claiming that she wanted to have 10 children. And remember, Christopher Watts, I almost said Christopher Watts. Christopher Watts wanted a large family. So how convenient is that suddenly his girlfriend claimed she wanted to have 10 children, right? I think the day he proposed to his future bride, he absolutely believed her story that she would be a nurse and that she actually did want to have a large family just like he did. I think the day he proposed to his future bride, he thought that she was truly the woman of his dreams. And in fact, she was, literally, because he was dreaming. Look at it. He was dreaming to believe that she was able to become a nurse or that she was devoted to becoming a mother of 10 children. He was dreaming. That reward system I mentioned, that I think started with sex and then morphed into Christopher Watts being some sort of a savior, I think it quickly morphed into walking on eggshells. By the time Christopher Watts married his wife, his support system was gone. Physically, financially, his familial ties, even spiritually, he was torn from all he had known and all which had given him the support throughout his lifetime up to that point. his close friends, his grandmother, his father, mother, and sister, his job, which he had worked so hard with his schooling and with getting such a good job. He was making good money, you guys. I know he gets bashed a lot about his income. He was making good money when he met her. He had a savings account. He had excellent credit, etc. He was torn from all of that, all that he had known. Because remember, his future wife told him that her doctor said they had to move to Colorado for her health. He was naive. He was naive beyond belief to think that a doctor would have told her that she had to move for her health. I think he was also very naive to believe that she was able to somehow suddenly stop taking 28 meds cold turkey. In fact, I think he was even more naive to ever believe she was ever taking 28 meds daily to begin with. But when he moved to Colorado, this was before the wedding, remember? When he moved to Colorado, his capture was complete. And then when he signed on the dotted line for a $400,000 debt, that was it. His chance of escape was over. And remember, just 1 month later, he signed a quitclaim deed on the house to place his wife on the deed. She wasn't on the mortgage. She was on the deed. So he had just buried himself in debt and just handed away any possibility of any future equity. I think psychologically speaking, his freeze response survival instincts were in play each time there was any new conflict. Any conflict with his family members. Remember, before the wedding even happened, they were accused of cross-contaminating the food. Are you kidding me? He should have been out the door. But by then, he was already trapped. Look at his job. He should have said, "No way, sugar. I'm not leaving this job. I have a good job. I worked hard for this." But he didn't. He left that job and he took another job that paid a lot less. The conflict of where they would live, Colorado, really? Do you think that was ever in Christopher Watt's plan? But I think that he wasn't thinking about each decision at the time of any conflict. I think he was instead freezing to avoid the complex bevy of emotions flooding into his cognitive lobe. With his cognitive lobe already trained to keep mum, lest she become unhinged if she didn't get her way. There was no longer a boundary. There were no longer two individuals. There was one. And the one being in their marriage was his wife. His identity had already blended into hers, and he took his cues from her from that time forward. With each new purchase, with each new vacation, with each new baby, he took his cues from her. And he trusted her emotionally out of survival. while his frontal lobe cooperated by just nodding his head and hoping that this or that, whatever it was, would finally be the key to having a happy wife. And remember, he was raised in the church. He was a devout Christian, coming from a Christian home with loving and stable parents and grandparents who did not train their children to seek drama or center stage. Both he and his sister were raised to be respectful of others, to be honest, to be kind. His wife was not respectful, honest, or kind to him, but his intellectual and emotional templates would not have allowed him to even be able to recognize that another person would be manipulative or dishonest, or even downright conning him to go along with whatever she expected him to go along with. Any time he would begin to question the integrity of his wife, I think his freeze response survival instincts would have kept him right where she needed him to be, working, bringing home the paycheck, exhausted, doing all the chores at home, taking care of the children, etc., and saying yes and smiling to whatever her demands of the day would be. As soon as she became pregnant, just 4 months after they married, he was no longer questioning her at all, if he ever did. Because to Christopher Watts, marriage was a forever bond, and especially after becoming a father, Christopher Watts was in it for life. Any moments of despair would have been quickly turned into tranquility, as he would no doubtedly tell himself that a happy wife means a happy life, while he would ask how high each time his wife told him to jump. But then along comes March of 2018, and Christopher Watts learns that his lovely wife was not paying the house payment. They were 3 months behind already before he even found out how careless and reckless she had been with their finances. And remember, he never thought to question her stories about her supposed successes, right? I think there's a reason that Christopher Watts is happy in prison. Because he's no longer his wife's prisoner. He's actually free. Because he's free to think. He's free to feel. And he's free to play. I know that sounds dorky, but he's free to actually enjoy a television show. He's free to actually think his own thoughts. If he wants to play a board game, he's free to actually make his own moves. Have you seen those videos? My gosh. Where she's calling him a loser when they were doing that life-size checkers thing. He couldn't even play a game without having to shrivel up into being a nothing. I think in prison that he's no longer stuck in the freeze response survival instinct. Because I think in prison he's actually free to be himself again.